All right, now I've adjusted every easy thing. I've taken my raw exposure, I've adjusted its colors, its values, overall with direct adjustments, and then I went in and I dodged and I burned and I got my specific adjustments. And if I did them too strongly, I could always use opacity to moderate them. And now on a copy layer, I can also use the blur tool, which we haven't used much. And the blur tool I can use just like dodge and burn, but maybe a little bit bigger. And 0% hardness for sure. And a strength, I'm actually going to leave the strength at 100% because the blur tool can take a long time to see what it does. And I actually like my focus pool here. But if I wanted to take away focus from something, like away from this edge, for instance, I would just paint it with the blur tool. And it would slowly take that focus away. See, it's very subtle. But maybe that gets the eye to focus more where I want it to focus. Yeah, I can live with that. So the blur tool is another direct tool adjustment we can make with the mouse. Okay, now I want to zoom out so I'm seeing the whole format. And there's another kind of dodging and burning I can do. And you'll notice on mine, my object's pretty centered, and I want the eye to really focus on these edges and on these textures and to kind of swim around it. But the eye gets kind of tugged away by this really strong rectangle. And so what I'm going to do is what's called vignetting. And to vignette, I'm going to make a duplicate. So Command J. And then I'm going to use my burn tool. And I'm going to set it on midtones a little bit stronger, maybe like 25%, but really big, much bigger than a pencil eraser. More like the size of a ping pong ball to my photo. So maybe about like this. And I'm actually going to paint on the outside edges of my frame, first with midtones, letting just the edges of my brush go through. And you want to build this really slowly. This is called vignetting. Vignetting is whenever you treat the edges of your photo separately than the center. And you'll see how subtle that is. It just frames the image just a little bit more in almost a subliminal way. Helps you focus more where I want you to focus. And you can even shape your vignetting a little bit. Cut into it. Now the problem with burning, of course, you can see it starting here, is it will start to give you a color saturation. So often how I will deal with that is I'll just select out around my object loosely like this and delete that from my burn layer so that my burn layer is an empty frame that I can play with, like so. And I can use a soft eraser. It's like replacing the background in your portraits. A large 100% opacity soft eraser. And I can kind of gradate in the background vignette. And you can vignette by lightening as well with the dodge tool. It doesn't always have to be burning. And that allows me to then adjust the color and the saturation in particular of the burn tool separate from my photo. You know, give it more color, like Andres Serrano might do. Or in my case, because I don't want the color to interfere with my object, take its saturation away. And since we tend to overdo things, I use my layers to kind of blend them in. And I can even erase away from that burn layer without any negative repercussions. So that is vignetting. You want to keep it subtle. Now I'm going to save it. And now we get to play with some new stuff. Okay? So, under your windows, you have actions. And we introduced this early, but we haven't really used it for a project in any serious way. So all versions of Photoshop come with some default actions. And one of those is vignetting. So let's try vignetting just so you can see how it works. I'm going to go to I'll make a copy of my last layer. I'll turn off my vignette layer. I'll label it so we can see what that is. And not all of your effective object photos should use vignetting, but you should be aware of it as an option. So I'm on a copy now. And now I'm just going to play this. You should view each of these folders as a shelf of VHS videos. And in order to see what's on the shelf, you have to open up the folder. And then to play the VHS video, you click on it until it's blue, and then you press play, just like on a VCR. What you're not allowed to do on a VHS video is open it up and mess with the tape inside. So you don't go beyond just this one step after the folder. Otherwise, you'll mess up the action. But what the action is simply a series of commands within Photoshop that are programmed in. And we're going to learn how to make our own actions eventually. But for now, let's use the one that's given with Photoshop. And it's called vignette selection. So first I have to make a selection. I'm just going to select the whole layer, and then I'm going to press play. And let's see what it did. I'm not really sure what it did, honestly. Didn't seem to do much. So let me go back in my history. Before all that stuff, right when I changed the name. Okay, so the first thing it did is it made a copy. Then it made a new layer, and then it filled it with white. So it didn't exactly give me a vignette. Let's try it on a raw exposure, because I think maybe the layers confused it. So if I open this up with Photoshop, my point is going to be that I don't like the built-in actions in Photoshop, so we create our own. But here, let's try vignette. And I haven't tried vignette in this new version. Strange.
How do you get to vignette?
It's under actions. So you get to actions by going to window and clicking on actions, and then you'll find vignette under default actions. So let me see. I believe because it's vignette selections, this is a long walk just to show you how I don't like the built-in actions. Let me try to select the area I want to vignette. So let's say I want it vignetted like this. And then I go to actions, and I click on vignette, and I press play. And then the feather radius, I pick how soft I want it to be. This is like erasing away. So let me say 25 pixels. And so it will give me a white vignette with a feather frame that's slightly soft. So that's, pretty useless in Photoshop. But it did it in the right way. It did it by making a copy and then by putting like a background layer behind it. So that's how actions work, even the ones given to us by Photoshop. Now the beauty of actions, though, is you can write your own, and you can find them online by photographers that allow you to use them. So black, white, and sepia is one that I've liked. But in order to use them, you want to flatten your image first. So what I'm going to do to set up my photo now for actions, I've done everything I can to make it what I want. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I save it with my name. And it's sample 3 PSD to the desktop. And now I'm going to do something we've never done, which is I'm going to save it as a TIFF format. And before I save it as a TIFF, I'm simply going to say layer, flatten image. Discard hidden layers. Now I have just one layer, and I want to be careful not to save this as a PSD. But I'm going to call it sample 3 test and change its format to TIFF with LZW compression, always LZW compression. What that allows is that this is a type of format that doesn't distort my image at all, but it does save space. And this is what we call an archive format. So when we print, we will print off of our TIFF flattened images. Okay? But what it allows us to do is now I have an image that has all my choices, but it's flattened and it's still full resolution. And then I can play different actions on top of it, like black, white, and sepia, for instance. And I've modified all these actions so that they'll open up as a different file that's named after the action. And then they have a series of adjustments. And my actions are basically made for taking a bad exposure and processing them. But this is already a processed exposure. So I would expect the actions to make them look really too strong, like that. But then I can use these adjustments. And lo and behold, channel mixer is one of those. Right. And I can decide, okay, which ones do I like? Which ones don't I like? Which ones help and how much do they help? So this is for making it black-white and for giving it a color. And then if I click on these adjustment icons here, I can change the different variables. So this sets up for me to be able to process it as a monochrome picture with varying levels of saturation. So maybe I like that. Then I want to adjust the levels a little bit differently. You see? And I can get something that I like. And maybe I think this is the most effective finished way instead of the way that I came up with. But what I love is now what I can do is I can flatten that action. I can go to Layer, Flatten Image. And I've made the selections. I've made this image what I want. And then I'm going to select it all and copy it over. So I say select all, or I can do Command A and then copy it. And then I can paste that, edit paste or Command V, right on top of my original. And then I can use opacity to blend that into my original. And find the best of both worlds to make that photo more exciting. And that's just the black-white sepia action. I'll show you more actions in the next demo.